Donaghadee was already a port of some 2 centuries standing when, in the 1820s, its harbour was rebuilt by the same team of engineers that had just done the same at its Scottish counterpart, Port Patrick, a mere 22 miles away. With the advent of the railways 4 decades later, all that each needed was a railway to supply a steady stream of passengers and goods to either end of the Irish Sea crossing. In 1861, the BCDR didn't yet have a Bangor line, so the simplest way it could reach Donaghadee was by extending its Newtownards branch instead, resulting in a rather roundabout route which in distance terms was as long as the journey to Scotland itself, possibly one of the reasons why this crossing was dwarfed in popularity by Larne to Stranraer. There were 2 new intermediate stations, the short-lived Conlig, which only lasted a couple of years, and Groomsport and Bangor, later renamed Groomsport Road and later still renamed Ballygraney. The station building is still there, now the headquarters of a removals firm who, pleasingly to people like me, still list the station name as part of their address. Along the former line, many of the old bridges are still there, although the roads have been realigned in some cases since then, leaving some of them looking a bit incongruous, such as this one beside Green Road, now cleared of vegetation and sitting beside a new housing development, and this one near the little hamlet of Cotton. Beside this water tower in Donaghadee itself is a short walkway that follows the path of the old line and leads towards Malile Road, which had its own minor station itself, opened in 1928 and only half a mile from the main station at Donaghadee. The railway passed onto the road here, as you can see in this photo taken from the archway of the now gone bridge. And then immediately went under this second pedestrian access bridge, which is still there, although I'm filming it from the opposite side. Overall, the new railway was largely welcomed, even if initially it was seen as a bit pricey compared to the horse-drawn car, and even if it did take commuters a leisurely hour and 10 minutes to reach Belfast, giving them plenty of time to reclaim some lost sleep or read their paper. The terminus itself was unique on the BCDR by being the only station that used a pre-existing building. The railway company bought 2 townhouses on the parade and just built the new station in their back garden, remembering to leave enough room inside the buildings for a railway hotel, and although this was probably intended to be a temporary arrangement, it persisted until the end in 1950. Where the station itself would have sat, this rendered wall is all that remains. It would have stood to the far right of the platforms as you approach from Belfast. In the early days, there was no harbour wall, so it was not unheard of for passengers alighting on dark nights to head straight out of the front door of the station and fall into the water below, or if the tide was out, the rocks. The problem might have been alleviated had whoever owned the gas lamp outside the station bothered to light it, but apparently they rarely did. The economy measures didn't end there. The top floor of the station building fell victim to dry rot in the 1930s, so they simply cleared it away and left the building in the truncated form in which it stands today. Although what I believe is the station master's house still stands in largely unaltered form. There was also a track to the end of the pier at the foot of the lighthouse. Although it was the intention, had the plan to run the ferry to Port Patrick come off, to load passengers from the boat straight onto the train and whisk them into Belfast, it actually ended up being used to transport coal and other cargo instead. But the worst economy measure of all was, yes, you guessed it, closing the line altogether in April 1950. Being a seaside town with not much industry beyond catering for the tourist trade, Donaghadee was particularly hard hit, losing much of its footfall to Bangor, which kept its train. On the last day of operation, the newspapers from the day reported, a very elderly woman called Mrs. Muskimmin watched the last train leave Donaghadee, much as, 89 years before, from the same spot right here, she had watched the first one come in. That's me for another station, and in fact another branch. Tune in the next time wherever I end up. I promised you something non-train related, but with rails the last time, and the weather has been against me, so I'll make no promises for the next one. But as ever, if you like my videos, please like, comment and subscribe, and as I always say, wherever I end up, I'll see you the next time.